Hello, I'm Elodie. People always say your family is supposed to be your safe place, the one place where truth doesn't get twisted. But what happens when your truth is the very thing they keep rewriting? My sister slapped me across the face in the middle of a jewelry store, right there in front of strangers, and the only person who stepped in wasn't even related to me. And somehow, that slap wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was everything that came before it. The quiet, steady erasure. Being cropped out of photos, blamed for debts that were never mine, and hearing my own mother tell me, "You were never meant to lead." So when a billionaire stood there, called me his wife, and told her, "Touch her again and see what happens," I didn't know what to feel. Was it justice? Or was it just the first time anyone had actually seen me? Would you have stayed silent as long as I did? I arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late, just precise enough to avoid looking like I was trying too hard to matter. The sun was sinking behind the Santa Barbara hills as I parked a couple of blocks away from the house I grew up in. It was glowing now, dressed up in rented lights and overflowing flowers, like it had been rebranded for someone else's story. Tonight was Isolde's wedding rehearsal dinner, and apparently I had a role. Not invited, not acknowledged, but still expected to show up and perform. The driveway was already full, but that didn't surprise me. The Varelli name still carried weight in Mission Canyon. Just never for me. I slipped around to the back entrance, exactly as I'd been told. My mother didn't want me coming through the front and confusing the vendors. She said it gently, of course, wrapped in that careful kindness she had perfected over the years, the kind that sounded warm but never felt it. Inside, everything was controlled chaos, beautiful, polished, but still chaos. Isolde stood in the center of it all, dressed in cream silk, holding a clipboard like she owned not just the evening, but the entire narrative. "Elle," she called out without even looking at me, "can you check the gift table? Make sure the tags are correct, and the place cards at table 5 are crooked." Before I could respond, my mother walked past me, pressing a coffee cup into the florist's hand. "Not mine. Never mine." "Elodie has such an eye for detail," she said brightly, smiling at the florist instead of me. "She's our little secret weapon, aren't you, sweetheart?" I nodded. No one noticed. There wasn't a place card with my name on it. Not at table 5, not anywhere. So I stayed near the kitchen, balancing a plate on my lap while servers moved around me, refilling trays and restocking food. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't really hungry anyway. It wasn't new. I had been placed in the background for as long as I could remember. I thought about being 12 years old, running around lighting candles for my mother's birthday, while Isolde stood at the front of the room, accepting compliments for a party she didn't plan. I had written the menu by hand, marinated the food, folded napkins into shapes I learned from magazines, and then my father raised his glass and said, "To Isolde, our true hostess." I smiled back then, like I always did. I never corrected anyone. I thought staying quiet was strength. I thought it was grace. Back in the present, I stood at the edge of the rehearsal dinner, watching relatives gather for photos. Isolde looked perfect in every frame, leaning into her fiancé, laughing in sync with my mother, as if their happiness had been choreographed. Someone waved me over to join a picture. I took a step forward. Then Isolde's hand rested lightly on my arm. "You look tired, Elle," she said softly. "Maybe skip this one. The lighting isn't great over here." I nodded. Of course I did. No one noticed. That night, when I got home, I didn't cry. I did laundry, I organized my kitchen, I checked my email, then checked it again, like I was waiting for something that would never come. Then I opened Instagram. My mother had posted a surprise pre-wedding brunch, matching outfits, a decorated cake, a slideshow playing in the background filled with childhood photos, my childhood photos. My sister's voice echoed over the video. "Family is everything." I hadn't been invited. Not even a message. Just a caption. "Surround yourself with the ones who matter." I set my phone down slowly. The silence in my apartment felt heavy, like it had swallowed every sound. Either they forgot me, or worse, they remembered and chose not to include me. I didn't call them. I didn't ask why. Instead, I stood in my kitchen and whispered, barely audible, "If I don't matter to them, I'll build a life where I do." The message I sent was simple. I stared at it for a few seconds before hitting send. "Can we talk this weekend?" I didn't wait for a reply. I went back to work. Tuesday afternoons at the boutique were usually quiet. Just me, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, and the occasional customer. But that day, the silence felt different. Heavy. Pressing. A little after 4, the bell above the door rang. I looked up, expecting something ordinary. Instead, a woman I had never seen before walked in. She wore a tan linen blazer, oversized sunglasses, and carried herself like she belonged in a boardroom, not a small boutique. "Hi," I said carefully. She didn't return the smile. "Are you Elodie?" "Yes." "You vouched for Isolde Varelli, didn't you?" Her tone was sharp, direct. It took me a moment to understand. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." Her expression tightened. "She told me you recommended her, said she was trustworthy. I gave her $25,000. My chest tightened instantly. "I didn't. I never told anyone anything like that. I didn't even know about this." She let out a frustrated breath. "Then why would she use your name?" I didn't have an answer. Because this wasn't new. Because my name had been used before, quietly, conveniently, whenever it served her. "I'm sorry," I said, steadying my voice. "I'll talk to her, but I didn't approve any of this." She looked at me like she had heard too many excuses already, then turned and walked out. The store felt empty after that, but not in the usual way. Something had shifted. I closed early, unable to pretend everything was normal. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. I needed silence. I needed to think. When I got back, I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, and called her. Isolde answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Elle, what's up?" "Someone came into the store today," I said. "She said you used my name for some kind of investment deal." There was a pause, just long enough to matter. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "That?" I repeated. "Relax," she said with a small laugh. "I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. You're the stable one. People trust you." "You used my name without telling me." "Elodie, don't overreact. It was minor. That's how these things work. Everyone vouches for everyone." She said it so casually, like she was doing me a favor, like she had given me a role I should be grateful for. "I'm not your human buffer, Azella." There was another pause. "Oh my God, Elodie, are you seriously upset? Mom said you always take things too far. It's not like I scammed anyone. I'll give it back." "That's not the point," I said, already knowing it was useless. That night, I didn't sleep right away. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it made slow, rhythmic turns above me. My mind wandered back to 3 years ago. Isolde was interviewing for a director role at a nonprofit that supported single mothers re-entering the workforce. She'd asked me to help her with her presentation. We'd spent a weekend together, me drafting slides, editing language, coaching her tone. She got the position at the award dinner. She gave a speech about women lifting each other up. She never said my name. When she introduced me to the board afterward, she laughed and said, "This is my sister. She's the quiet one." The quiet one. I got in my car the next morning and drove toward Carperia, not for any reason except that I needed to see the ocean. I parked near the cliffs and walked to where the sand met stone, the sky overcast, water slow and steady like breath. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet because I thought it was the right thing to do. That silence kept peace. That self-erasure was a form of strength. I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe silence just gave people more room to step over me. By the time I returned home, something inside had shifted. Not an explosion, but a reset. I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, looked at years of holiday gifts, passive-aggressive potluck reminders, and photos where I was always off to the side. Then I deleted it. I went to my contacts, scrolled to a name I'd saved after a legal workshop I helped host last spring, Austin Legal. I typed one sentence, "Can we talk this weekend?" And this time, I waited for the reply. Then I clicked accept. I stared at the calendar notification a moment longer before locking my phone and setting it face down on the arm of the couch. The living room had gone quiet except for the low whir of the old ceiling fan overhead. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the orange tree just beyond my kitchen window. I didn't move, not right away. I stood up eventually, more out of instinct than decision, and walked toward the linen closet. Inside, pushed behind a stack of mismatched towels and a faded Christmas table runner, was an old wooden box with brass hinges, the kind my grandfather used to keep his tools in. I pulled it down, brushing away a layer of dust as I sat cross-legged on the floor. Inside, pieces of me I hadn't looked at in over a decade. Tucked beneath dried lavender and curled edges of photographs was a folded sheet of notebook paper, the kind with the perforated edge still clinging on. My handwriting, too neat, too desperate, read, "I wish you'd tell them I helped too." I remembered writing it. 16, raw with some ache I couldn't name. I had planned to tuck it into his oldest book bag before a school trip. I never did. I kept telling myself I'd outgrow the need to be seen. I unfolded it again, read every word like I was seeing it for the first time. Then I reached for a matchbook in the drawer under the TV. The first flame flickered just past my fingertips before I closed the matchbook again. I didn't burn it. I folded the letter even smaller, tighter, and slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans, like it needed to come with me for whatever came next. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. 13 years old. That's when it started for real. Mom and Dad were hosting their 20th wedding anniversary at home. It was going to be small, just close friends, some pal workers. Isolde had volleyball practice and couldn't help, so I stepped in. I planned it. Every detail, the timeline, the playlist, even the table placements. I color-coded the menu based on who had dietary restrictions. I stayed up until midnight handwriting the guest cards because our printer jammed. The next morning, I found my binder, ribbons added, my handwriting traced over in silver pen, Isolde's name on the front cover. I froze. I didn't ask. I didn't say a word. She handed the binder to Mom at brunch, who beamed and said, "That's my girl, always the leader." I remember holding my original binder beside the trash can in the garage. I stood there for a long time before finally dropping it in. I told myself back then she needed the win more than I did, and that became my excuse for everything. She needed the attention. She needed to feel capable. I told myself that letting her have it wasn't weakness. It was kindness. It was maturity. It was love. But the truth? It was silence. A silence I had agreed to because it kept the house from cracking. I opened my eyes. Back in my apartment, the light was dimmer now. Shadows crept along the tile floor. I stood and crossed to the mirror above the sink. I stared at my reflection, not for beauty or age or lines I hadn't noticed, but to meet something in my own eyes. "It wasn't okay," I said softly. It didn't echo back in the physical sense, but something in the room shifted. Something in me, too. For years, I'd believed that being the calm one gave me power, that by being dependable, by stepping aside, I had control over how I was remembered. But what if all it did was teach them how to forget me more efficiently? A ping from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. I returned to the couch and tapped the screen. Calendar invite. No subject line, just a title. Confidential meeting. Prenuptial review, sent by Augustine Cade. My thumb hovered over the screen for a beat before I accepted. And then, instead of putting the phone down, I picked up the little wooden box again and placed it on the shelf, open for the first time. The morning air was cool when I stepped out of my car in the underground garage below Augustine's building. Saturday, just after 10. I hadn't slept much the night before, but not from anxiety. More like my mind had finally gotten too loud to pretend it wasn't saying things I didn't want to hear. The elevator ride was quiet. No music, no small talk, just the soft hum and numbers changing. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted me by name and gestured down the hallway. His office wasn't what I expected. Not cold, not overly grand. Sleek, yes, but lived in. A bookshelf with titles that weren't just decoration. A ceramic bowl with car keys and a scratched wedding ring he probably didn't wear anymore. He looked up from behind a long table standing as I entered. "Elodie," he said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thanks for coming." I sat, smoothing my hands over my skirt, which had wrinkled during the drive. "Let's not pretend this isn't unusual," he chuckled, nodding. "Fair enough, but it's honest." He slid a folder toward me. "In short," he began, "this would be a 1-year legal marriage. No expectations beyond what we mutually agree to. Public appearances, occasional joint events. You'd be compensated substantially." I flipped through the pages. It felt like reading about someone else's life, someone whose world operated on clauses and fine print. I didn't speak for a while. When I did, I asked, "Why me?" His gaze didn't waver. "Because you don't crave attention, and because I've watched you be erased in rooms you should have commanded. I respect quiet people who know they don't deserve to be forgotten." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe to listen. The voicemail began mid-laugh. My mother's voice unfiltered, talking to someone. Probably one of her sisters. "Elodie, that girl always needed someone to remind her she's not the main character. Sweet, sure, but she's not made to lead. She's background. That's just how it is." The message ended. I didn't feel punched. I felt solid. Like a wall had finally dropped and I could see the structure behind it. I replayed it once, just once. Then I deleted it. Augustine hadn't spoken during my reaction. He waited. I looked at the contract again. Not because I needed convincing,
but because I needed a second to swallow what I just heard. My mother, someone I'd always defended, excused, rationalized, had said exactly what I had been afraid to admit. She didn't see me. Not as an equal, not as her daughter in full. Just a support beam.
I folded the paper, not signing yet. I used to think she meant well, I murmured, not even realizing I was speaking aloud, that maybe I was just hard to love in the way she understood. But now I don't think she ever looked for me in the room. He didn't nod, didn't offer comfort. That I appreciated. He waited for me to finish my own thought. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Augustine's brow lifted, more in respect than surprise. But one thing, I added, if you lie to me in any form, I walk. I don't care how many zeros are on the check. He nodded slowly. That's fair. I've lived too long on other people's terms. I'm not negotiating who I am anymore. We both stood. No handshake, no smile, just a shared understanding. The drive home was quiet again, but this time I didn't feel invisible. I felt sharp, present. There was a clarity I hadn't carried in years. I parked in front of my apartment, grabbed my phone, and called the boutique. 1 ring, 2. Hi, Janine, I said when my assistant picked up. I need to step away from the store for a bit. Personal reasons. A pause. Sure thing, Elodie. You okay? I will be. I ended the call, opened the calendar app, and added a new contact to a new profile, Mrs. Cade. I hung up with Janine, then took a breath that felt bigger than the room around me. The call had been brief, but every word of it carried weight. I wasn't asking for permission. I was informing. And that shift, however small, mattered. By Thursday afternoon, the sun was out in full force, throwing gold across the streets of downtown Santa Barbara. I parked 3 blocks away from Corvana Co. Not because I had to, but because I needed the walk. Each step helped settle my mind, center my thoughts. When I walked into the boutique, the atmosphere changed. Elodie, welcome back. The assistant manager beamed as she approached with a light touch on my elbow. We just got the new arrivals. Would you like sparkling water while you browse? I smiled, a little surprised. Not long ago, this staff barely made eye contact. But now I had a last name that carried weight in the building. I'm just looking, I said, but thank you. I wandered over to a display near the back, letting my fingers hover above a modest gold necklace. Simple, clean, not too loud. Something I would have picked for myself before the contract, before the voicemail, before Mrs. Cade. I was holding it up against my collarbone when I heard the laugh. It hit me before I even turned around. Sharp, performative, unmistakable. Isolde and our mother. Their voices moved closer before I even had time to set the necklace down. When I finally turned, they were already 10 feet away, gliding in like they owned the place. Isolde's eyes met mine and froze for a beat. Elodie, she said, as if my name tasted strange in her mouth. You shop here now? I didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly. Or are you just returning someone else's generosity? The way she said it, just loud enough for 2 nearby staffers to hear, just soft enough to feign innocence, made my stomach clench. Our mother looked at me, then quickly away. Elodie, don't make this awkward. Your sister has an appointment. I nodded once. I'm not the one making it awkward. Isolde stepped closer, her smile tight. Honestly, Elle, it's getting weird. You showing up in places like this, dressing like you suddenly found yourself in a magazine spread. I didn't flinch, she continued. You're not fooling anyone. You've always needed someone to carry you. Now you found someone rich enough to make it look legit. I let her words settle, let the silence stretch so long she started to fidget. Then I said clear and steady. If I make you uncomfortable just by existing, maybe it's time you sat with why. Isolde blinked. I'm not your echo anymore, so stop calling me noise. That's when the air shifted. People stopped pretending not to listen. Our mother opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure of where to land. For once, I didn't try to help her. Isolde's face flushed. She took a step forward, just a little too fast. Oh, you want to act like a big shot now? She said. Fine, act like one. She stood inches from me, her voice low now, eyes narrowed. But don't think I won't call it what it is. You're using someone, just like you always accused me of doing. Her hand twitched, a reflex maybe, maybe not. I didn't move. Her eyes dared me to flinch, to retreat like I always had, but I stayed still. The clerk behind the counter took an awkward step toward us, likely unsure if this was personal or security-worthy. Everything around us felt frozen. One wrong word could start a storm. She didn't touch me first. She spoke first. "This is why you'll always be backup cast." And then the slap landed. Hard, fast, and louder than anyone expected. Even her. The sound cracked across the boutique like glass under pressure. I didn't move. Not when her hand hit my face. Not when the tray beside me clattered to the ground. Not even when my necklace slipped from my fingers and bounced twice before settling at the base of a velvet pedestal. The room stopped. No one breathed. The sales associate froze mid-step. A couple near the register turned toward us. Someone's phone made the distinct click of a camera shutter. My cheek burned, but my hands didn't go up. My mouth didn't open. I just bent slowly, deliberately, and picked up the necklace. My fingers trembled, but I stood tall. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Then, just as the silence was beginning to crack under its own weight, another voice cut through it. Clear, cold, and undeniable. "Touch my wife again and see what happens." Heads turned, phones lifted. Gasps echoed against marble and crystal. Augustine. He stood just inside the doorway, still in his navy overcoat, one hand in his pocket. His presence wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. He didn't step forward like a man defending someone he pied. He moved like someone protecting what he respected. The moment he crossed the showroom, the entire room shifted around him. Isolde blinked, stunned. Wife? He ignored her. Instead, he came directly to me and placed a steady hand at the center of my back. Not possessive, anchoring. To Isolde, he said, voice flat as slate. "I saw everything, and you're lucky she didn't hit back, because I might." Our mother sputtered. "Excuse me, but this is a family misunderstanding. There's no need to escalate." He didn't even glance at her. He raised a hand slightly, and from the far end of the store, 2 security personnel in dark suits stepped forward. Not a word was exchanged. Just that simple signal. "I don't care whose sister you are," Augustine continued. "This isn't a street corner. This is my property, and no one assaults my wife and stays." Isolde took a half step back. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious," he said, "especially when it comes to who's allowed in my life or my stores." She looked at me now, confused and cornered. "You married him? What is this? Some performance?" I finally met her eyes. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what she'd see in mine. "You didn't ask where I've been," I said quietly. "Maybe you should have." The air in the room thickened. Phones were recording now. A young woman near the bridal section whispered to her friend, "Is that really her husband?" Augustine remained calm. "This location, I own it. And as of now, your sister is no longer welcome." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Our mother stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage whatever control she thought she still had. "Augustine, with all due respect, this is a private matter. We don't air our family business." This became public the second someone raised a hand in my store, he interrupted. "And trust me, nothing about what just happened will remain quiet. Your daughter saw to that." The security staff reached them now. One gestured toward the door. Isolde stood frozen, face pale, lips parted in disbelief. "I didn't mean," she began, but her voice didn't carry anymore. Not in that room, not today. They were escorted out slowly, without resistance, but with eyes on them the entire way. And when the glass doors finally closed behind them, the silence broke all at once. Murmurs, questions, phones slipping into pockets. I didn't speak. Augustine turned to me and asked softly, "Are you okay?" I nodded once, though my jaw still ached and my hand clutched the necklace a little too tight. The manager approached, asking if I needed anything. Water, a quiet space, an escort home? I declined. Instead, I walked to the counter and asked the associate, "Can you box this up, please?" She nodded, her eyes kind now, her demeanor shifted. As I waited, I caught my reflection in one of the display mirrors. Same face, same eyes. But something in me had altered. I didn't feel small anymore. Sometimes it wears a quiet smile and watches the world adjust. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't something Augustine said. It wasn't even something I'd read. It was the feeling I carried all week after the jewelry store. I didn't rush to fill the silence that followed that moment. I let it breathe. I let it settle. 1 week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at the boutique with my name hand-lettered in navy ink. Inside was an invitation to the Santa Barbara Women's Empowerment Gala head table. I thought it was a mistake. I scanned the list again, flipping the card front to back. My name, but no mention of Isolde. When I brought it home and set it on the counter, Augustin glanced at it and said casually, "They reached out through my office. I'm a sponsor. They asked if my wife would be attending." There was no smirk, no weight in his voice. Just fact, no performance. "And you said?" I said I'd let her decide. I took a slow breath, then nodded. The night of the gala, I wore a deep blue gown. Not flashy, not stiff, just right. Something I chose for myself without committee approval. My hair pulled back, my earrings simple. The kind of presence that didn't have to announce itself to be known. When I arrived at the venue, the event staff greeted me by name. One of them walked me to my table. The centerpiece was a glass sculpture shaped like a wave. The place card read, Augustin. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, fingertips grazing the edge of the chair. The room filled quickly. Executives, local politicians, nonprofit directors, women in pantsuits and women in pearls. I offered polite hellos, but didn't chase conversation. And then I saw her. Isolde walked through the front doors, flanked by two women I vaguely recognized from her workplace. She was radiant, polished as ever, her signature laugh already in use. She approached the check-in table confidently. The woman behind the iPad paused, then typed again. "Sorry, what was the last name?" "Varelli," Isolde said, brows lifting as if the woman had insulted her. Another pause, fingers typing again. The woman's tone didn't change. "I don't have you on the list." Isolde laughed. That same laugh she used to dismiss everything. Mistakes, hurt feelings, facts she didn't like. "There must be a mix-up," she said. "I was asked to present. I've been on panels here for 3 years." "I understand," the woman said evenly. "But I don't have you listed for this year. Perhaps there was an oversight." Or, she didn't finish the sentence. Isolde's smile flickered. Just a fraction, but it was enough. Enough for me to recognize it. Confusion meeting consequence. She looked up past the check-in, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on me. We locked eyes for just a breath. I didn't move, I didn't wave. I simply held her gaze unflinching. Then she looked away, turned around, and exited as gracefully as she could before the cameras caught her. Later that night, after I returned home and kicked off my heels, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The gala program lay beside me on the table. I didn't read it again. I'd lived it. I opened my phone and saw a missed call from a number I hadn't saved, but the voicemail transcribed itself on screen. It was my aunt, my mother's sister. The message was short, a little shaky. "I thought you should know. His oldest said something at dinner the other night. Said she always made Mom love her without trying. Maybe that's why she hits hard, because you never needed to raise your voice to be heard." I listened to it twice, then placed the phone down gently beside my glass. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my planner, turned to the next week, and wrote 3 words in the margin. Board application, Cade Foundation. Not revenge, not rebellion. Just forward. I didn't need noise. I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed space. And now I had it, and closes it. The drawer gave a soft click as it shut. The photo folded inside, resting where it belonged. No longer on display. No longer pretending. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence fill the space around me, like water reaching stillness after a ripple. A few days had passed since the gala, enough time for the noise to die down, for whispers to shift toward newer topics. But inside, things hadn't gone quiet. They'd rearranged themselves. That morning, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. The handwriting on the front was familiar, slanted, deliberate, and hesitant. My father's. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers brushing over the seal before opening it. Inside, 1 page, handwritten. No opening line, no date, just this. I knew. I watched. I chose silence. I regret that silence more than anything. You deserved better than my passivity. That was it. No justification, no attempt at revisionist history, just an acknowledgement. The kind that had never come when it would have mattered more, but came anyway, because maybe he realized that waiting for the perfect time was how people like him lost their daughters. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the drawer where I kept bills and medical documents, not as a keepsake, as a record. The next day, I met Isolde at a small cafe near the courthouse. No cameras, no audience, just 2 sisters sitting across from each other at a corner table that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and vanilla. She showed up late, of course, sunglasses on, blazer buttoned even though the afternoon sun was unforgiving. "So," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You really married him?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who no longer needed to explain herself. "Not everything is about you," I replied. "And not everything about me needs to be explained anymore." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You act like I'm the villain in all this. You made your choices. I just stopped letting them cost me." She didn't respond, just stirred the iced coffee she hadn't touched. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope, placed it between us. "What's this?" "Open it." She did. Inside was the necklace from the store, the one that had dropped when she slapped me. There was a note. "You always said it looked better on you. I'm giving it back, but I'm not giving you me." She stared at it for a long time, her mouth parted like she might argue, but no sound came out, and I didn't stay long enough to hear if she found one. I left without looking back. Back at home, I opened my laptop and finalized my application to join the Cade Foundation board, not because I needed to prove anything, not because of Augustine, but because I had a voice now, and a platform that didn't require permission. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks to the post office and mailed the envelope myself. No courier, no assistant, just me, waiting in line like everyone else, holding something that no longer weighed me down. When I returned, I pulled up the form for my legal records. Name, Elodie Mercier Cade. Not for show, not to spite anyone, because I chose it. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of mint tea. The sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows over the walls. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out one last thing, a photo from childhood. My mother and sister beaming in the foreground, posed like queens. Me in the corner, only half in the frame, almost invisible.
I looked at it for a while, then folded it in half, not with anger, just finality, and I placed it in the same drawer where I had filed the letter from my father. But not everything stays closed forever. Some drawers creak open again, not from indecision, but because life finds ways to remind you that even closed chapters leave their scent behind. And that morning, a knock at the door wasn't a person, but a delivery, a box. No note, no return address, but I knew. I didn't open it. I set it beside my entryway table, beside the photo albums I hadn't touched in years, and the umbrella stand I still hadn't emptied since last winter. I didn't need to read what might be inside. Some apologies come too late, and others don't come at all. Both can live in the same silence. That afternoon, I drove downtown. The notary's office was quiet, the receptionist soft-spoken. I had my papers ready, no hesitation. The man across the desk asked twice if I wanted to reconsider, as if giving up family claims was an act of desperation instead of liberation. "I'm building a different legacy," I told him, signing with a steady hand. There was no ceremony to it, no one waiting outside to clap or question, just me, an ink pen, and a document that cut me loose from a weight I didn't owe anymore. On the drive home, my phone rang. Aunt Delia. I pulled into a shaded parking lot before answering. "Hey, honey," she said, voice familiar in that cracked wallet Sornfue. I didn't want to leave this in a message. I waited. You know, for a long time I thought keeping quiet made things easier for everyone, that if I stayed out of it, I wasn't part of the problem. A pause, a shaky breath. But watching you these last few weeks, it made me realize silence is just permission in disguise. And you, Elodie, you didn't just break a pattern, you rebuilt something better. Tears welled, but didn't fall. That was the difference. Now I could feel everything without it undoing me. "Thank you," I said. "No, sweet girl, thank you." Later that week, I stood in the Cade Foundation's conference room facing a modest group of donors, advisors, and staff. Augustine was there, off to the side, arms crossed, watching but not steering. I took the microphone. "My name is Elodie Mercier Cade," I said, "and today I want to introduce our newest initiative, the Quiet Rise Fund." A slide clicked into place behind me. Simple white background, 4 words in soft gray font, for the girls silenced. I spoke not to impress, but to reach, about women who had been tucked into corners, treated as support beams, denied their stories, and how this fund would help them write new ones. When I stepped down from the podium, no one stood. There was no dramatic applause, just quiet nods, real ones. After the meeting, I walked through a community garden our foundation had helped reopen. Rows of herbs, tomatoes, marigolds. A few children ran along the mulch paths, giggling. A little girl in a faded sun hat approached me, holding a potted seedling. "Why are you here?" she asked. I knelt beside her, brushing dirt from my palm. "Because someone like me once needed someone like me now," I said. She nodded solemnly, like only little kids can be, then offered me the seedling. I took it. That evening, after rinsing my hands and setting the small plant on my kitchen sill, I sat quietly on the couch. The unopened box from my mother was still there. I picked it up, turned it once in my hands, then placed it at the back of the closet, behind winter scarves and last year's text folders.
not to forget, just to move it out of sight. Some things don't need to be open to be understood, and some battles don't need a victor, just an end. They told me I was born to support someone else's spotlight. I looked out the window as twilight settled over the street. Turns out I was just meant to build my own room with its own light. Sometimes the loudest strength is the one that never raises its voice. Elodie's story reminds us that being overlooked doesn't mean you're weak. It just means your moment hasn't arrived yet, and when it does, it won't need permission. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? What would you have done in her place? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more true, powerful stories like this waiting to be told, and maybe yours is next.